بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا الحمد لله رب العالمين. We went over the prayer times yesterday, so I'm going to just quickly go over the terminology so everybody. The two times that the Malikis divide into, the first time is called Mukhtar, which means you have the choice from akhtara, yakhtaru, to choose for yourself. So it's a convenience time. The best time to pray for dhuhr, which is generally considered the first prayer, is when the shadow reaches the dhira', which is from here to here. So if you take the dhuhr, like right now it's 2.5 feet, and you add that much time, which is usually it's an hour. So generally the Malikis delay dhuhr, which is why if you live in if you live in Mauritania, they don't pray dhuhr till about 2:30 on average, even though it comes in at about maybe like 1 o'clock. So they delay it, which is nice because the time from Fajr until dhuhr is time for work, and so it kind of frees you from the obligations of prayer to be doing what you're doing, so it's uninterrupted work.
Sorry, what was the name of the
Dhira' is from your elbow to the tip of your thumb.
I thought that, as well as waiting for a discernible, noticeable difference in the length of the shadow, they also practice the ibrad as well.
The ibrad also, good point. Yeah, ibrad is mandub as well, which is to let that midday period, which is the hottest period, to cool off. So that's a good point, because the ibrad is mentioned in the books. We just don't, that's not really much of an issue in, if you're in an equatorial country like Sudan, you go out at 12:30 and you have a heat stroke by the time you get to the masjid. So that's the point of just letting people let it cool off. And then the daruri time is for dhuhr begins at asr time. So once asrs come in, given a short window of the mushtarak time, the shared time, once asr comes in, you're now in daruri time of dhuhr. So if you don't pray, if you delay dhuhr until asr, it's sinful. Unless you're doing mushtarak, which is to pray the two at the waqt mushtarak. But if you delay it, it's sinful, and then you should say astaghfirullah, make tawbah for that, feel remorse. And then the daruri time of dhuhr is up to the time that you can pray dhuhr, 1 rak'at of asr, and the sun hasn't gone down yet. That's a daruri time. So as long as you've done that, you're in ada, not qada. Ada is the performance of the prayer in its time. Qada is making up a missed prayer. So qada is like it's you're not praying dhuhr, you're doing qada of dhuhr. Do you see? So dhuhr's gone, you missed it. So qada is just making up something that you've missed. It's a good question. If you say, it's better to distinguish between them, but as long as you make, if you're doubtful, then you make ada. So for instance, if you get up for Fajr and it's isfar time, but you don't know, has the sun actually come up, you can pray it ada'an and you get the prayer's valid. If you don't know. If you know, then you should distinguish between the niyyah. So you should say dhuhr qada'an in your heart, that you're making it up. Alright? If you didn't, it's a valid, as long as the prayer's valid, you wouldn't have to make it up again. I know, and you're doing it, you should make the niyyah of qada, not ada. But if you did, the prayer's valid, you don't have to make it up. Do you see what I mean? Yeah.
And the dhuhr would be missed completely after sunset, is that it?
It'll be missed completely after the time that you cannot pray one rakat. So even if you prayed dhuhr before the sun went down, but by the time you're done with dhuhr, you don't have enough time to do one rakat of asr, it wasn't dhuhr, it was qada. Because you're out of the time. The time includes enough time to pray asr. And then also Malikis have tartib, unlike the other madhabs. You have to pray the prayers in their proper order. So you can't pray asr first and then dhuhr. Or if you come into a masjid, they're praying asr, and you, like Shafi'is, you can pray with them and then pray dhuhr. You can't do that. In Maliki, you have to pray according to the niyyah of the imam and in the order of the prayer. Unless you owe 5 or more prayers, and then you can do it like that. But we'll deal with that when we get to the prayers that you owe. Mm-hmm.
So if you walk into a masjid and you don't know what the jama'ah, you should just have prayer to pray.
Yeah, if it's like you don't know. First of all, in Malik's madhab, there shouldn't be more than one jama'ah in a masjid. Like the idea, he says you should go in and pray separately. You shouldn't actually make a second jama'ah. In a place like this, it would be okay because everybody knows everybody. But his reasoning is, it gives an opportunity for mubtadi'ah who don't want to pray with the ratib. So you might be from a group that doesn't agree with the imam. So you just happen to be late every day for the prayers, and you create your own jama'ah. That was his fear.
So this doesn't mean at the same time, at any time?
Any time. Yeah, you should only have one jama'ah in a masjid that prays 5 prayers a day, the ratib. Other than that, he said you should just come in and pray separately. It also encourages, if you think about it, not being lazy about going to the masjid, because if you can always get the jama'ah in the masjid, you're not really going to be very diligent about the prayer time, or some people won't. So, but that's definitely true. His fear I've seen that. There's people that when they go into a masjid and they see who the imam is, like his beard's not long enough, or so whatever, they pray a second jama'ah. So if you come in and you don't know the niyyah of the imam, you shouldn't pray with them according to Imam Malik. The other thing is, even in traveling prayers, Malik prefers you if you go into a masjid and you're doing traveling prayers, you should do the traveling prayers, not pray with the jama'ah. The exception that the Maliki ulama make, not Malik, but the exception that the Maliki ulama make, unless it's a well-known righteous imam. So if it's somebody who's known for salah, and then there's a blessing in praying behind them, then you pray behind them and do 4 rakats, not stop after 2, which some people do, and I don't know if that's an opinion, but in Maliki it's not valid. Because you could go in and they're praying jama'ah and they're actually doing dhuhr and asr, combining it, and they're in asr prayer and you think they're praying dhuhr.
Isn't that like the default assumption you make?
Why?
It's asr time.
No, it's not. It's dhuhr time. They're bringing asr forward.
Wouldn't you automatically assume that they're praying dhuhr? Didn't you just assume that they're praying a little further, praying at the time?
Not if there's a second jama'ah. You see what I mean? If it's the ratib jama'ah, yeah, then if you're there at dhuhr time. I'm talking about other jama'ahs, which people will go in.
You know it's not the regular jama'ah.
Because the imam prays up front in the mihrab. It's makruh to pray in the mihrab other than the ratib. But people don't know that. But generally, I mean, the jama'ah prayer, you generally know, and there's usually a little prayer time like thing up there, dhuhr 1:15, asr 3:20. So you could just look and check your clock. So, and then the asr time comes in when you have the fay, which is what? Residual shadow from the waqt al-istiwa, the istiwa time, which is 90-degree angle. So the sun comes up, goes up when it reaches 90-degree angle. I mean, it might be in the southern hemisphere, but in the relationship to the two horizons, 180 degrees, it's midpoint. So maybe it's down here, and so you have a residual shadow, the fay, which is along what's left over. And that is facing initially due north, always, due north. So if you have a compass, you can see. If the shadow's decreasing, you're still in the pre-meridian time, anti-meridian. If it's increasing, you're in the post-meridian. All right? So you can check with a stick or with your feet, however you want to check. So once that begins to move, dhuhr's in. It keeps moving, 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 until it reaches whatever you're measuring with, the height of what you're measuring with. So if it's a stick that's 5 feet, when the shadow reaches 5 feet plus whatever the fate was, the residual, then that's asr time. It's now the daruri of dhuhr time. That will continue on until right before sunset. But the daruri of asr is when there's a discernible change in the coloring, the coloring of, the quality of the, it's called isfirar, which means yellowing. There, you can see it. There's a change. If you look on buildings, you'll see a change in the. It's not that brilliant brightness that doesn't have any hue. It's a change. So, I mean, I would, in our climbs, as long as it's like an hour before sunset, hour and a half before sunset, you should be okay. But once you're getting close to sunset, it's bad. You don't want to do that, and it's a sign of nifaq. The Prophet ﷺ said also.
The hadith that says when you delay until the sun is bayna qarnay shaytan.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
There's a hadith that says shaitan, that the sun goes down between the two horns of shaitan. There's a very interesting phenomenon in the Sahara Desert, which I've tried to find it, but there's a National Geographic that has it. If somebody finds it for me, I'd appreciate it. There's a phenomenon in the middle of the Saharan Desert, which is it's a horn phenomenon. It's amazing. Because these two horns fill like the whole sky just as the sun's going down. And you can only see it in one area in the Sahara. It's two horns of light. They're fire. It looks just like fire. It's amazing. It's in National Geographic. Years ago. And I couldn't find, I went through all these National Geographics looking for it, Because it's one of those images you never forget. It's like, where is it? But there's a phenomenon. It's an astronomical phenomenon according to them. It's like an optical illusion. But it is amazing because they really are two horns that just go up. But the Prophet ﷺ said, the sun goes down between the two horns of shaitan. It'd be worth finding that picture because it's kind of a, it is a sign, yeah.
Is that it?
I don't know. Just the whole, I don't know.
I've also noticed that in basically collection in museums, like the goddesses, they would, the statue would be there, and then the goddess would have two horns, and the sun would be around it.
Yeah, that was Horus carried the sun across the sky in their mythology.
The thing is, people
He did have horns. Yeah.
used to worship those statues. So.
Yeah.
What's the reasoning behind that hadith?
What's that?
I'm asking what is the reason why did the Prophet say that?
It's about praying when the sun is going down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I have a question related to that.
Uh-huh.
So is it true during Maghrib, it's like a bad time to be outside and...
I would encourage kids to come in, at dusk. It's definitely وَغَاشِقِينِ إِذَا وَقَبْ. The Quran says, when the moon comes out, things, that's one of the meanings of that. There's definitely nighttime is when, that's when the vampires come out. Dark people go out at night. Most criminal activities in the nighttime.
During that
You know, I mean, just normally, if you look, police, no, you talk to any police about the difference between day and night. I mean, that's why I say in broad daylight, it's like a shock for somebody to do something in broad daylight. You know, nighttime is the activity of the shayateen. I mean, it's...
No, but during the sunset time.
Yeah, no, that. I don't know anything. I've never seen any dalil for that. It's kind of a... I think it's just a folk tradition. Allahu alam. It's a folk tradition, but it has a basis, which is, you know, it's time to come in, especially for children. They should learn that. You don't want them kind of out there.
But like
Little kids, I mean, older kids are fine, you know.
in general for adults, even like going out.
No, I don't. I mean, as long as you prayed, you know, I wouldn't worry about that, you know. But the Prophet ﷺ said, if you knew what I knew, you wouldn't go out at night. That's a hadith. And I mean, if you knew what the police know, you wouldn't go out at night. You know, I mean, there's a common sense to that, as well as his metaphysical knowledge of what happens at night, because, you know, it's a different world at nighttime. Yeah. And then, so the istiwa, we did that, Mukhtar. And then the sunset is when the sun is completely gone from the orb. Now, the Prophet ﷺ said, we'll deal with this in fasting, but to let you know, he said when you see the night from here coming and the day leaving from here, قَدْ أَفْطَرَ الصَّائِمِ إِذَا أَقْبَلَ اللَّيْلُ مِنْ هَا هُنَا. So the إِقْبَالُ اللَّيْل is, there is a line of darkness that you will see on the eastern horizon. If you're in a place that you can see the horizon, it's a line of darkness. It's a gray color, but there's no orange. If you can still see orange on the horizon, the sun's not down, according to fiqh. So when you start seeing that night coming, and then on the eastern thing, you'll see the western, you'll see the idbar. So you have iqbal and idbar. The idbar is that, you know, the coloring that comes. Once the sun's gone down, you start seeing that sunset coloring. So there's actually, those are the two discernible phenomena. The eastern phenomena, which is the graying of the horizon, and then the western. And it's very discernible. And the thing about prayer times, you have to have yaqeen. You should not go into prayer times with what's called ghalib al-dhan unless you have a real reason for it. But it's better to delay your prayer to get certainty than to pray it before. You actually get a reward for delaying it. That's like Ramadan. You know, it's people that want to hasten Ramadan. It's like you get a reward. If you're uncertain, you get a reward for delaying it, you know. Mm-hmm.
How does that work with Fajr? Because sometimes it's already so bright in the sky that it's really hard to see like the new light that's coming from Fajr. Like Fajr's supposed to come in at like 4:30, but like, I don't really
You can't
the
see it
in the
here.
sky until
And that's why with the prayer times, if it's here, you know, I would give it some time, like 15, 20 minutes. It should be fine. I wouldn't do it right at the time, though.
You're not getting to balloon or anything then, are you?
No.
If you wait until like half an hour,
Not to get certainty.
it would be okay with
It's you get a reward for that. Yeah. You know, my teachers in Mauritania, even though there were watches, they knew exactly when. They knew the prayer was in. They wouldn't until they saw it. You know. And I mean, you know, like just from seeing the crescent moon, it's such a different experience to have the certainty, you know, than just to hear it from somebody else. So, and then the sunset is until the shafaq al-ahmar, which is the red. So it's not the twilight that is the Hanafi. And somebody pointed that out. It was a good point, good reminder about the Maliki. Isha comes in earlier, and these prayer schedules are done according to the Hanafi generally. The Asr is not, though, because I've checked it. The Asr is the first Asr, not the second. And then And then, generally, the Maghrib is all daruri. That's the way you should look at Maghrib. You should do it quickly. The Isha is to the first third of the night from Maghrib. So that 4-hour period in an equinox from Maghrib. So if Maghrib's at 6, right, up to 10. So if Maghrib comes in at 6 and goes out at 7:30 or 7, then from 7 to 10 is the Mukhtar of Isha. According to Dominant, there's a strong opinion that it's the half of the night. So you'd actually go 6 hours. Mm-hmm.
I know at least in Islamic finder, the Isha time is based upon the angle of the sun again. How is that better? Do you know what angle it corresponds to for the ending of the day?
You know, I don't know that the Maghrib angle, but what I would say is the Shafaq is dependent on where you are. So you're not going to have a uniform angle with that. It's just going to depend on where you are. The Fajr, is also dependent on that, but the middle of the earth is going to give you a reasonable, acceptable reading for that. Whereas once you go into these extreme northerly, extreme southerly climates, you're going to get, it differs because of the curvature of the earth in relation to where the sun is. But that's something, we should check about the angle and the shafaq, how well that can be determined. That's another one of those, and then, so the mukhtar, the daruri of Maghrib and Isha is like Dhuhr and Asr. Because you have to see Malik's philosophy here. He sees 3 prayer times. Fajr is a single. That's why he calls it the middle prayer. Because it's between the 2 prayers of the day, Dhuhr and Asr, and the 2 prayers of the night, Maghrib and Isha. So he considers, when Allah says, وَالصَّلَاةُ الْوُسْطَى, حَافِظُوا, like guard your prayers, and that middle prayer, the wusta prayer for Malik is Fajr, not Asr. And he knew the hadith in Al-Bukhari. He was very aware of the hadith in Al-Bukhari. So it's not like, he didn't know the dalil. He knew the dalil. And that was also the opinion of Imam Ali ibn Abbas, who's the interpreter of the Quran. So it's not like Sahaba who were there at Khaybar when they missed the prayer. They were there, so they knew they missed the prayer, and they knew the Prophet said that. So, but that's his philosophy. That's why he keeps those prayers together, because the Quran indicates that there's 3 prayer times, not 5, in that way, even though there's 5 according to the Sunnah. So the Sunnah has 5. Those are the times where it's Sunnah mu'akkada to pray in those times, right? Mm-hmm.
You say yesterday that Maghrib and Isha could be combined, like Dhuhr and Asr combined.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That's what I just said now. That the Maghrib and Isha share a time, waqt mushtarak, and Dhuhr and Asr share a time, and the Dhuhr and Maghrib times go all the way to the end of the Isha times in terms of ada. So if you prayed Maghrib at 3 in the morning here, it would be ada. It would not be qada. So say you fell asleep at 7 o'clock, and you wake up, and this has happened to me. Like, I've flown from Saudi Arabia here, and then, I've fallen asleep like at 6 in the afternoon, and I wake up at like 1 o'clock in the morning. I haven't prayed Maghrib. That's happened to me before. That prayer is ada. It's not qada, because you're still in the time, according to Imam Malik. Not according to the other imams. He's the most generous with the prayer times, which is nice, because the hisab on the prayer times is إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتْ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا مَوْقُوتًا. These are on in specific times, and the first thing people are taken into account for is the prayer.
What's the definition of ada?
Ada that you're performing it in the time. You fulfilled the time obligation. If it's qada, you have missed the prayer. The prayer is gone. Dhuhr ends at sunset with 1 rakat of asr, right before sunset. Dhuhr's over. If you left it until that time, you did not pray dhuhr. Dhuhr's over. Do you see what I mean? You're not praying dhuhr. You're doing a qada of dhuhr. You're making up dhuhr. Whereas if you made that time, you're actually performing dhuhr in its time. It's still its time. Even though it's a daruri time, it's still its time. Got it?
So, let's say you prayed the dhuhr and you said if you didn't catch the 1 rak'ah of asr before the sunset,
Okay.
the dhuhr would be qada, right? And then what about the asr?
Yeah, it's qada. If you miss dhuhr, you definitely missed asr. Yeah, because the only way you can miss dhuhr is by missing asr. Yeah.
Do like Maghrib and Isha, do they have like a Dhuhr and Asr, like a Maghrib?
They do, yeah, which is that time at the end of the shafaq and the beginning of the twilight. That's mushtarak. So if you pray Maghrib at that time and join it with Isha, it's makruh. You know, unless you did it for a valid reason.
Doesn't the Dururi of Maghrib start at the beginning of the Shafaq?
That is the dominant. No, the darur, that is an opinion. The daruri begins at shafaq. Some say, and it's one of those things where there's really 2 opinions on it. So, some say the daruri begins when the adhan goes, the time is in, and the time it takes you to do wudu and to prepare for the prayer and find a clean place. That's mukhtar. There's no mukhtar. You have that time, and then it's daruri. And then some say no, the mukhtar is up to the shafaq. So as long as you've prayed it within the shafaq, you're in the convenience time of maghrib. So you have that time. Unless you're breaking your fast. And then it's the time, not to have a meal, like that is a bid'ah, to do what people do now, which is where they pretty much have their meal before maghrib. And then they pray. The sunnah is to have the dates and the water. And that's enough. ذهب الظمأ, my thirst is gone. وابتلت العروق, and my veins have been quenched, with the sugar. So then you pray. But people now, they have like a meal and hadir, and that's okay. To have something light, it's just not having the big meal. Where if you have soup, like some cultures, they have amr ad-din, the different cultures do different things. They have sweets, whatever. That's fine, but it should be a light thing. It shouldn't be you shouldn't be having the meal. You should break the fast, pray, and then eat, like that.
Is that because it's sunnah, or is that because the time of Maghrib is already?
That's because the time, the fasting only extends the time to break the fast.
Okay, but if, say for example, if your car was about to fall off the cliff, and then you have to go and save your car, then you could, and then you have to pray during the Waqt al-Salah. Is that's okay?
That's fine. Or a surgeon who's performing surgery, and it's time. He's got more he's got a lot more leeway. If it's saving life, inqadh al-haya, then you have the leeway.
Okay.
Yeah. So, all right, now we're going to the prayer. So the book of prayer, Salah in Arabic, comes from, there's different debates about the root of it, but one of the meanings is to burn up, because the prayer burns up sins. Sayasla, you know, that like in the Quran it uses yasla to burn or roast. Sanuslihi saqar, you know. And then it's related also to connection, a connection. It's your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salah is obviously different from dua, although salah contains dua. Prayer, because in English we use prayer. I mean, they used to have orations, you know, orations. That was an older English word. I mean, there was a lot more. Older English has a lot, very specific terms. A lot of that's been lost. So in Arabic, you know, prayer is specifically referring to that. Although it does mean dua in the Quran. It can mean dua in the Quran, yeah. Like هو الذي يصلي عليكم, you know, yeah, it's the dua and inna salatika sakanun lahum, you know, your prayer, your dua is a repose for them. The fact that the Prophet's making dua, so it's used to mean that also. So the obligations of the prayer are 16 according to Ibn Ashir. The opening takbir, which is takbiratul ihram. Ihram is to enter into, just like in Hajj, when you enter into ihram, you're entering into a sanctified state. It has hurma. The state has hurma. So when you enter into a sanctified state, you're not supposed to be accosted. Like, that's why you're not supposed to walk in front of people. And also, during that time, you can't talk, you can't eat, there's things you're not supposed to do, because you're just like you have ihram of Hajj, there's certain things you can't do, right? That's what a hurma state, you know. I mean, that's why the Arabs call the women hurma, because there's certain things she can't do that men can do, right? You know, she's inviolable in that way. She's to be protected. A stranger shouldn't come up to her and just start talking to her like he could a man, because of the hurma associated with her. All right. So that's the idea of takbirat al-ihram, is you enter into a consecrated state, and then you have the qiyam, standing upright during the opening takbir, right? If you're able, obviously. And then intention for the prayer directly before or with the takbirat al-ihram. So in your heart, if you're what they call muwaswis, if you have obsessional thoughts, if you forget all the time, like I can't remember, is this dhuhr or asr? You know, if you're one of those people, I mean, there are people that have that problem, you know, sallamukum Allah. But if you do have that problem, then you say the niyyah out loud. Salat al-dhuhr, 4 rak'at, you know, fard, whatever, praying and ada'an. So that you make that niyyah of whatever prayer you're doing to complete the fard. And then you have recitation of al-Fatiha, which according to Imam Malik is from Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen to the end. It does not include the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And when we get to the makruhat of the prayer, the ta'awudh and the Bismillah, the Basmala are makruh according to Imam Malik. The Malikis go Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So there's no iftitah, there's no opening prayer. It's just directly into the iftitah. No. But you say Ameen, but it's not in the Fatiha. And then reciting while standing. And then, so that those 5 relate to your standing position. And then you go into the ruku', which is bowing. The rak'a means to break the back. Raka'tuhu, you know, so ruku' is your, you know, the bowing of the back. And then ruku' also, when you do the, you know, the takbirat al-ihram is, I mean, if you did it like that, Allahu Akbar, it's, you know, to bring your hands is a sunnah, but if you bring them up to the hadwa al-mankibain, you know, some of them have the ear, like the Hanafis have the ear. Malik is hadwa al-mankibain, so it's in parallel with the shoulders. And then when you say Allahu Akbar, and then they go down, and then, according to Sahih al-Bukhari, حتى تسكن الجوارح إلى مواضعها, until everything goes to its natural resting place. That's in Sahih al-Bukhari. So the hands go to their natural resting place. And I'll get in the dalils for the Maliki for leaving the hands aside, which are very strong. They're not weak dalils at all. They're very strong dalils. It's not necessary. Like the Khawarij don't do it. You know, the Khawarij, the Ibadiyya and the Khawarij did not do that. They just did. And they left their hands at their side. And the Prophet praised their prayer. He praised the outward form of their prayer. So if you just came in and you said Allahu Akbar, it's valid to go into that. But this is a sunnah to do that. Allahu Akbar. Some of them say it's an ishara of putting the world behind you. You know, just Allahu Akbar, like everything other than God, I'm putting it behind me.
Sometimes when you're going like that, you're putting...
What's that?
When you're going...
No, because you go up first.
Yeah, that you're putting everything behind you.
Yeah, no, it's like that. Allahu Akbar. Yeah. Yeah, both ways. So, and then the prostration, sujood, in utter humility. Also, just when you go into the ruku'ah, right, we don't raise our hands again. And even though the hadith is very strong for raising the hands, it's very strong. Both Imam Malik and Abu Hanifa knew the hadith. They both knew the hadith. They knew the strength of the hadith. And yet they rejected the practice. And one of the reasons is Ibn Umar, who relates the hadith, did not do it himself. So people, you know, that's why it's such a mistake to think that you can just follow these hadiths like, you know, Nasiruddin al-Albani's kind of view, I'm going to choose for you these hadiths. It is the strongest hadith, that you do that every single time. There's no doubt that hadith is incredibly strong. 10 of the major Sahaba relate that hadith. But Malik didn't find anybody in Medina from the Tabi'een doing this who lived with 10,000 Sahaba. It was not the practice of the people of Medina. So he said, I'm not going to take a solitary hadith when I'm living with all these people that prayed with the Sahaba, who prayed with the Prophet according to the last period of his prayer, and they didn't do that. And that's Malik's methodology. The hadith are not... If they're not mutawatir, he doesn't take them as just, I'm going to accept the hadith. Because the Prophet, there's different hadiths, there's contradictory hadith, there's hadith that the Prophet did one time to show you that it wasn't makruh. The Prophet ﷺ did certain practices and then he left them. I mean, that's all, but it makes life interesting, diversity. People doing that.
What about
the sadal?
Is that also...
Yeah, I'm going to go into sadal when I get there, but some of them consider it practice in Medina. We'll do that. I'll do that. Mm-hmm.
How loud should the takbir be said when you're...
The Malikis definitely do it louder. Like, you know, if you're in Morocco, if you're in Mauritania, and then the thing about in Mauritania, it's like, you know, the Imam says, Allahu Akbar, and then they start going. Because the Malikis have istihdar an-niyyah, right, at that time. So... some of them take a little longer to get their niyyah, and you're supposed to have khushu', and the Maliki fuqaha say you should preferably at least have it, because you have to have it for at least a moment in your prayer, that you try to get it at the outset. So you'll hear people kind of, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. So it can actually be a little disconcerting, because they do that, and they say it out loud. They don't say it softly. So, but you know, generally it's just audible. So, Allahu Akbar. You know, if you're in a place where people are not used to Malikis, people, you know, they get bothered by it. So it's just better not to bother people. But you should at least say it so it's audible to yourself. And then when you go into ruku', right, it's down. Now, according to the Malikis, you should not lock your knees. There should be a slight nasb rukbatain. There should be a slight... you know, the knees should be slightly, they shouldn't be locked. They should be slightly I've seen a lot of, I had one teacher that did that. Like he was like, but he was older, and I don't know if he did that for that reason. But and then this should be straight, and then the eyes are just down there. Okay, so that's the ruku'.
Can you face your eyes?
Yeah, he mentions that. We'll get to that. So a lot of these questions will be answered as we go through this. And then rising from prostration to the sitting position, saying the final salam once to exit the prayer. So it's pronounced Assalamu alaikum. The Malikis have a slight turning to the right, Assalamu alaikum, and that's it, one time. And I'll get to the again, this is the practice of the people of Medina. In Imam Tirmidhi's collection, there's a hadith that Aisha said, if the Prophet left a prayer, he did it with one salam. And Aisha related that hadith. The hadith is not as strong as the hadith that says that he did it with two. In the Sharh of Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi, he mentions a sound narration from Zuhri, who's one of the biggest ulama in Medina from the Tabi'een, who studied with countless Sahaba and took hadith from the greatest Sahaba. So Imam Zuhri, who's the teacher of Imam Malik, saw a man once pray in the masjid of the Prophet, and he said, Salaam alaikum twice. He went up to him and he said, where'd you get that second salam from? Which shows you they weren't doing it in Medina, right? I mean, the proofs for Malik's prayer are very strong. So he said, where'd you get that prayer from? And he said, I got it from so-and-so, from so-and-so from Ibn Mas'ud. He said, I've never heard that. And the man said to him, do you know the whole of all the hadith? He said, no. He said, do you know 2/3? He said, no. He said, do you know half? He said, yes. And so the man said, put it in the half you don't know. So Imam Zuhri laughed, But the truth is, Zuhri's proof is stronger according to the Malikis. Because even though Ibn Mas'ud relates that hadith, are you going to disregard the inherited practice of all of these people for a solitary hadith? That's, you see, you have to understand the way Malik's thinking. And it's not his thinking. This is the school of the people of Medina. He's just the spokesman for the school who becomes the dominant spokesman. This is not his opinion. Mm-hmm.
You don't have to answer this too off topic, but is it fair to also say that the school of Medina is also very similar to the school of Ahlul Bayt, because Muhammad al-Baqir and Ja'far al-Sadiq were there?
Well, the Ahlul Bayt were in Medina. Imam Malik lived under the Muhammad Nafs al-Zakiyah's revolution for 18 months. He never took bay'ah with him, but he lived under his authority. And so there were a lot of the Ahlul Bayt there. And the Imam Malik relates hadith from Ja'far al-Sadiq, who's pretty much the faqih of the Ahlul Bayt. And he had immense love and respect for the Ahlul Bayt. I mean, he forgave the governor Ja'far when he had him beaten publicly. He forgave him just because he said that he was from the family of the Prophet. He said every time the man raised the whip to beat him, he said, Allahumma ghfir Ja'far, may Allah forgive Ja'far for doing this. So, and then sitting for the final salam, the performance of these acts in proper sequence of the foundations, standing fully erect, maintaining composure at points of stillness throughout the prayer. So that is a fard, what's called tuma'nina. Tuma'nina means you have to come to a stillness. You can't, like you'll see a lot of people do this in their prayers. They go like this and then they go that. They just do the ruku' and they come. There's no point of tuma'nina. You have to have tuma'nina. It doesn't, there's no specific time. I mean, the sunnah is to say 3 times what you say in those positions. There's no specific time, but if you go down into ruku', there has to be sakina. So if you go down, Allahu Akbar, there has to be that stillness. If there's not, then you've missed a fard from that. And that's why the man who prayed, and the Prophet, he came back, he said, صَلِّ فَإِنَّكَ لَمْ تُصَلِّ عِيدَ الصَّلَاةِ فَإِنَّكَ لَمْ تُصَلِّ. Go repeat your prayer because you didn't pray. He was praying too fast. And then following the Imam in both the takbir of consecration and the final salam. So you cannot go before the Imam with the takbirah, and you can't leave the prayer before the Imam. If you do, the prayer is invalid.
What if by mistake you said salam before the Imam says salam?
Yeah, then your prayer is valid. You just wait till he says salam, and then you say salam. If you do it, there should be some lag time. You should not do it, but it's valid as long as you do not precede the Imam. And in the Hanbali madhab, both salams are wajib. So khuruj min al-khilaf mustahab. It's good to get out of a khilaf like that. Whenever you have a fard type khilaf, it's better to. So if you're praying with the Imam, you should wait till he says the second salam. You shouldn't go. The Malikis, he only says one salam. But if you're praying in a place where they do say the two, because if he's Hanbali, as far as he's concerned, his prayer is invalid without that second salam. That's the khuruj, not the first salam. The second gets him out of the prayer. So if you go out before he does, according to his niyyah, even though it's technically correct in the Maliki, there's a problem. So it's better to wait till the second Imam goes out. If the Imam says Assalamu alaikum, you wait. Because the Hanbali, like in the Haram, those Imams believe that they're getting out with the second salam, not with the first. So if you go out with the first one, technically he's still in his prayer and you're out. So your prayer's really invalid. So it's just better to wait till he finishes. If he's Hanafi, they're out with the first. The second's a sunnah. And same with the Shafi'i. But in the Hanbali, the second is wajib. And then making the intention to follow the Imam if you're led. So if you're a Imam, you do not have to make the intention to be Imam unless it's Jumu'ah or like Janazah. There are certain prayers. I think he covers those later. But so if you but if you're a ma'moom, if you're following, you should make the intention of following, because your prayer is actually the prayer of the Imams. That's why it's encouraged to put the best people forward for the imama. Yeah, iqtida they're both the same. Yeah. Taqtadi bihi. You can also do what's called muwazat, which if the person is somebody you don't feel like you should be praying behind them for whatever reason, you have doubt about them, you can do, if it's going to look bad for you to leave, you can do muwazat with the imam. You can, in other words, you follow his motions, but your niyyah is to pray on your own. That's permitted to do that. It's kind of like a tuqya, but it's really for ta'lif al-qulub, so you don't upset people. And why didn't you pray behind the imam? Well, he didn't have a beard and I didn't feel comfortable with his. Because that's a valid reason not to pray, according to the Malikis. If the imam doesn't have a beard. I mean, there's an opinion. Nowadays, I personally would not follow that, because there's so many people without beards. But during the time they were writing these books, to not have a beard was like, you were pretty much a bad person. That was true. Whereas now it's not true anymore. It's just like women that don't wear hijab. In the earlier period, it's pretty much like, she would have been the lowest of the low, deemed like a fallen woman. Whereas now, there's a lot of virtuous women that don't wear, so you can't make those same, you have to recognize urf and the time you're living in, because the times change. And then, or of leading others as their imam in the fear prayer. So if you're doing Salat al-Khawf, joining prayers due to rain, because it's permissible to join them due to rain in the masjid, so people don't have to, trudge through the mud. The Jumu'ah prayer, or replacing a departing imam during the prayer. So if you do an istikhlaf, then you should make the niyyah of taking over the prayer. So, imama. Istikhlaf is, women don't have to worry about this, but for the man, which is why the sunnah is to have the most knowledgeable people in the first prayer line. There's a reason for that. It's not like, some kind of hierarchy or, it's literally so that if the imam does lose his prayer, he can pull somebody that he's certain knows the ahkam. Like in Kitab al-Hamqa wal Mughaffaleen, the imam lost his wudu and he looked back and he saw a really pious looking man, so he pulled him front and he said, Astaghfirullah, I only lead the prayer if I'm in wudu. So you want knowledgeable people. At least he was knowledgeable enough to know that you should be in wudu if you're going to lead the prayer. And then the conditions of performance of the prayer. So you have shurut. These are the shurut that precede the prayer. So facing the qibla is a shart. You have to face the qibla. Now in Maliki, I mentioned this, the qibla is a jiha. It's not Ayn al-Kaaba. It's a jiha. So a jiha is like this. Imam Shafi'i says there's 4 agreed upon jiha. So if you're praying, right, if you're here and you're in the west, okay, according to the Malikis, if you're in the west, in a northern hemisphere, you find the North Star and you put the North Star to your left ear, and that's Qibla, according to the Malikis. It's as simple as that. So the basic direction from the US is just east. The Shafi'is have Ayn al-Kaaba. Not all of them, because Imam al-Ghazali rejected that position in the Ihya. He said it's not reasonable. Imam Sha'rani says it's the position of the Arifin, because people of Ma'rifah actually see the Kaaba in front of them. And that's why they have Ayn al-Kaaba. Now, I can honestly say, and this is a true story, I was in England, we were praying with Sheikh Abdullah bin Bay, and he said, which way is Qibla? And I said, I'm pretty sure it's this way. And so we started the prayer, and then in the prayer, he turned like this. So we all turned with him. And then later somebody came and we checked with the compass, and it was the way he was praying. So I've seen that with my... And I know also, there was some people saying about the Qibla in Mauritania, Murattar Hajj's Qibla. Some people came to pray and they didn't agree with his Qibla. Because in Mauritania, if you don't agree with the Qibla, you have to pray the way you think is right. So somebody asked him about that and he said, Alhamdulillah, araha, like, praise be to Allah, I can see the Kaaba. So I'm not making those stories up. There's a famous story that I heard from a Libyan about this Libyan man who was like, nobody took him seriously, and he was, he used to come to the prayer and everybody would do their prayer, Allahu Akbar, and then like halfway through the first rakat, he would do his Allahu Akbar, like way after everybody else had gone in. So these guys got fed up with him and they said, why do you always wait like till the imam's almost done with the... He said, MashaAllah, you people are so much better than me. You get the Kaaba in front of you right away. It takes me a while before I can see it. That's that. Anyway, the jihad is like that. So as long as you're praying, like this is east here, is if you get within that, you're in the qibla. You don't have to worry. That is a valid qibla for the Malikis. According to one Maliki opinion, as long as you're in 180 degrees, you're on the right hemisphere, it's valid. That's a valid opinion. So that, and then there's the jihad, that's west, and there's the jihad. Like those are the four jihad. That's Imam Malik. He did not do tarkib, which is why in the Maliki countries you will see most of the masajid face, like the masajid of Andalusia, the early ones face due south. So the Qurtuba Masjid goes due south because they thought there was more south in the Qibla than east, so they all just face due south. So the masjids in Andalusia face Morocco. I don't know if you know about Patricia Crone's work, the Hagarites. Do you know about the Hagarites? She developed a whole theory that the Muslims faced Jerusalem until Abdul Malik bin Marwan. And then they turned the Qibla to Mecca. And so the whole revelation, it was later Umayyad put those verses in. And her whole theory is based on the fact that the early masjids in Egypt faced directly to Jerusalem. That's what she based the whole theory on. But it's the ignorance of the tradition, because these people never studied real tradition. They study these khutut al-arida, the Arabs call it, the broad strokes of Islam. But they don't go deep into the tradition. They don't study the text. They don't study with real ulama. And so they start, they make all these assumptions that they have no knowledge about and create these ridiculous theories that end up getting put into magazines like Atlantic Monthly, and people read these and actually take them seriously. It's the same with the so-called Qurans that were found in Yemen, right? Do you remember that? These Qurans that were different from the Quran that we read today. Nobody in the history of Islam has ever denied variant readings. Ever. None of the ulama denied variant readings. There's readings that differ from the Uthmani Quran. Ibn Mas'ud read with tafsir. So he has verses that are completely different from the other verses of the Quran. That he had a reading, Ibn Mas'ud. It's a shadda reading, but it's his reading. So he doesn't say kasuf al-mansuf. He says kasuf al-manfuz instead of ka'ihn al-manfuz. Because when he went to Iraq, ihn is a Qurayshi word which means dyed wool. The Iraqis didn't have that word. The Arabs in Iraq didn't have that word, so he said it just means suf. So he used to say kasuf al-manfuz. So those readings are there, so you're going to find variant readings. But it's utterly absurd, this idea that we don't somehow know what the Quran is, and the Muslims are going to be shocked when they find out there were variant readings. I mean, what Muslim, I don't know any Muslim that studied basic, right? Yes, you studied the Quran. Didn't they tell you about all the variant readings and the shadh, and right? Exactly. So anyway, that was my point about the masjids. Then when the later Malikis came to Andalusia, because the first people that were in Andalusia were following the madhab al-Awza'i. And Imam al-Awza'i believed that you should follow... This is actually really interesting stuff to me. It might not be to you, but it's pretty fascinating. The Kaaba... So here's the Hajar al-Aswad, Rukn al-Yamani, the Hijr. All right, the Kaaba is aligned to Suhail, the star Suhail. And then these directions are aligned to the wind direction. So this is called the Boreal, this is called the Levantir, this is called the Zephyr, and this is called the Southerly. In our tradition, like if you look on old maps, you know how they have the wind blowing have you ever seen that on old maps? Yeah, because wind was very important, to know directions of wind. Sailors have to know wind, doing that. Wind was also important for farming and things like that, depending on where, because you don't want
if you do certain things, like to where the trees are, where you lay the fields. So people don't have wind knowledge anymore, but it used to be people were very aware of wind, and they understood, and that's why you had the bellwether, up on to see which way the wind blows, right? People used to be aware of all that. They're not anymore. Now it's just wind. The Kaaba is actually aligned to the winds, the four winds. And the wind system is one of the most interesting things on the planet because it is a proof of design. If you look at how the wind is working globally, and that's one of the things about what's happening now is these wind systems are being disrupted. So because of the imbalance on the planet. And so there's a relationship. Now what's interesting about this, because this is about harmony, right? What's interesting about Suhail, right, this star here, Suhail, which is also called Canopus. If you look up Canopus, you can Google it. There's a section on NASA, because Canopus is to satellite positioning what the North Star is to terrestrial navigation. It's called the North Star of the heavens. So all of the NASA, when they do space travel, it's all based on Canopus. It was very interesting, that the celestial North Star, they actually say that this is the North Star of the heavens. And the fact that the Kaaba is aligned to the North Star of the celestial realm, because this is the most stable star. It's the closest star to our solar system that is stable, from alignment point. So all the satellites that are circling the Earth are aligned to Canopus. So this communication that's going up into the heavens is based on the alignment with Canopus. And that's how Sayyidina Ibrahim aligned it, according to Ibn Abbas, to the rising of Canopus on the southern horizon. Ibn Arabi actually said in the Futuhat that when Canopus disappears from the horizon of Spain, Islam will leave Spain. And the procession, that occurred in 1492. So you can actually look that up. And he said that a few hundred years before that, 400 years before that event.
Isn't that like astrology? Say something like that?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, astrology is not... Fakhruddin al-Razi, a lot of the ulama, they had tawaqquf about celestial signs. Just leave it. But there's no doubt that there's a correlation. We know where all the positioning of the stars were when the Prophet was born, and they all had to do with Sa'ada. Sa'ad al-Mas'ud, Sa'ad al-Sa'ud was in the horizon, Sa'ad al-Dhabih was in the top of the heaven, and Sa'ud was on the... So all the stars that relate to happiness were positioned on the day he was born, in the three positions, because you have the nadir point, and then you have the stars that are setting and rising on the horizon, and they were all related to Sa'ada. And that's mentioned in all the books of, Sirah. Mm-hmm.
So if our Qibla is to the east, and we have the 45 degrees in either direction, or even the 180 degrees,
Mm-hmm.
is there no benefit in even trying to figure out what, the exact, it's 48 degrees?
Imam Malik considered it a bid'ah, because he said none of the Sahaba did that. And he said none of them brought an engineer. I mean, they actually mentioned that none of them brought a mathematician, and they could have worked this stuff out. None of the early masjids were built, which is why most of them have incorrect qibla. If you start going into the masjids with a GPS, it has created a massive fitna in the Muslim world. In Mauritania, if you pray the way we pray in America, in Mauritania, you'd be facing Algeria, because that's the Great Circle from Mauritania. If you tell Mauritanians to face Algeria, they'll tell you you're insane. So these are, the northeast qibla is, it's an engineering issue, and it's considered. They consider it, loxodromic. This is a loxodromic route. All right. A loxodromic route follows a compass direction. So if you set out from here to Mecca on a compass direction, which would be basically east-southeast, I mean, you could work it out exactly what it is. If you stay on your compass point, if somebody watched you from space, they would see you going like this. But you would get to the point. You see, you won't end up in South Africa. You know that argument? You're praying to South Africa? That's only if you're praying by the Great Circle. But if you're praying loxodromically, which is the jiha, it's the compass direction. And that was the direction that the early community understood, was the compass direction. Now, if you pray the Great Circle, which is a constantly shifting line, so there's no compass direction with Great Circle. When they say the Great Circle is northeast, it's not true. Because that compass bearing is constantly shifting. In the 19th century, steamliners did not use Great Circle because they didn't have the types of tools that we have today, and they felt safer going the loxodromic route, even though it took them longer, and they knew how to do the Great Circle, but it was too easy to go off course with the Great Circle route. So they didn't do it. With modern technology, it's easy to do it because you've got the GPS, the global positioning system. So the debate of this, I mean, most people, it's not a debate anymore. It's like, and I don't even make it an issue, trust me, because it's just a fitna. But we used to pray towards the east, southeast. That was the qibla of the Americans, Muslims, including the slaves that came here from Africa. And we know that because of the way they're buried. And up till the 1970s, that's the way everybody. And then somebody wrote an article. He was an engineer, and he said it's quicker to go over the North Pole to get to Mecca, which is the way airplanes fly. So that, the rest is history. There were a lot of fitnas. There were a lot of fighting in masjids. So they created this fitna, and now they say, "Oh, don't bring it up because you'll make a fitna." Well, gee, what did you guys do back in the 70s? So there were masjids that split. People don't know this history in America. There was a masjid in San Francisco. Half the jama'ah prayed northeast, the other half prayed east-southeast. That was in San Francisco for years. They had two separate jummahs. And there's still people that face east-southeast in the country. It's unfortunate, but America is the only place where this is a real problem. In other countries, and if you live in Florida, you're lucky because it's negligible. If you're in Texas, Florida, if you're in those southern, but if you get to California, we're facing almost due north. We're 18 degrees off north. So there's almost we're past the 90-degree point. So it becomes a problem unless you take that second position, which is pretty much what Sheikh Muhammad al-Hassan al-Dadu said, to just do. Take that second position. Anyway, this is a madhab khilaf, and it's I had somebody do, who's a PhD from Stanford in engineering. He did a study for me because I was just find out which way is the qibla. Is it loxodromic or Great Circle? And Usman knows him, Ismail, Yusuf Ismail. He wrote a paper, which I have. I never published it because I just didn't want to. But he came to the conclusion that it's a hayyar. He was just bewildered by it. Because he said each one has its proofs, to do it. And they're both valid ways of determining direction. And they're still used. Both of them are used. Like geographers use loxodromic routes, which is why maps are based on, those directions. They're not based on Great Circle. Pilots, and I've asked several pilots, which way is Mecca? I've asked several pilots. In fact, I was actually, the FBI came to my house after 9/11 because I'd asked that question. So one of the pilots reported me. You know, they probably asked him, was there any suspicious behavior? And so they actually came to my house to talk to me about why I asked the pilot which way was Mecca. But I did a survey for a while. I used to ask all the pilots that which way was Mecca, you know, and they would always say east, southeast. And then I'd say, what about the Great Circle route? And they would say, you know, if you want a direction, then I would go east, southeast. But if you want to get there quicker, you know, that's the way you'd go. But it's not. You're going to be, you know, constantly shifting your direction. So most of the pilots I talked to, you know, a Saudi pilot told me, you know, he just said, that's crazy. Now, I'll tell you something really interesting about this country. The Jews in this country build their synagogues to Jerusalem. You know which way they face? East, southeast. And I asked a Jew about that, and he said, well, we've got this fanatic group that claims it's over the North Pole, but we just consider that a little obsessional. I mean, that's literally what he told me, that it was just like anal retentive, to use Freudian terms. You know, it's that thing of worshiping science. But anyway, don't make this an issue, because it's not an issue with me. You know, I'm sorry that it was never really discussed at a high level. It was just everybody makes the assumption. Azhar gave a fatwa that it's north, east. There were two dissenting ulama on that fatwa, so that's kind of not mentioned, that there were ulama that weren't convinced by it. Do you know? Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya is not convinced by it. He studied both sides of the argument. He prefers that it's a simpler, because the Sharia is ummiyah. It's a simple Sharia. It's not complicated. There's nothing in our Sharia that necessitates learning higher mathematics. Nothing. And the only way you could determine the Qibla by Great Circle is by having a very serious level of knowledge. Because there's no way you could do that without knowing how to, you know, it's basically, I mean, it's spherical trigonometry, but it's really done with calculus. I mean, those are the logarithms that are used now. So, well, if you're facing our Qibla, right, you're almost due north. Do you see what I mean? Because the jiha is only 90 degrees. And you're almost out. You're not out of it, but it's so close to north that you're far more north than you are east.
But don't you just determine the jiha based on where the Kaaba is?
No, you determine it based on where you are in relation to the Kaaba.
Right.
So if you're in the west, it's east. If you're in the north, it's south. If you're in the south, it's north. If you're in the east, it's west. That's Qibla. So if you're facing almost due north, you know, if you and I prayed in the same room and you're praying the Qibla of north, you're going to be facing that direction. I'm going to be facing this direction. That's a huge difference. That's not like in Florida. You're going to be here, and I'm going to be here. It's very slight. You know, even here, it's not going to be as much. But no, it will. Because this is probably about 17 degrees off north from here. Anyway, the Prophet ﷺ said, you know, Man salla qiblatana, whoever faces our qibla. Qibla is to Mecca. We all agree on that. How we get to Mecca, you know, you're going to take Great Circle or Loxodromic, they'll both get you there. My prayer doesn't fly by United Airlines, so I'm not really worried about, you know, that aspect of it. To me, it's a very weird, you know, it's this whole, let's make Islam scientific and, you know, let's be modern people. And I like the fitrah of 4 directions. It's the way Allah created us. You know, I don't really need to think about shortest direction and all this stuff. But anyway, I usually don't go into this. I'm sorry that I went into it. But just so you know. So, the whole point of this was just to tell you that Al-Awza'i considered that you should pray based on the walls of the Kaaba. And this was an early position. So, depending on where you were in the earth, you prayed to the wall. So, if you were here, you didn't face the Kaaba like that. You faced the wall that extended out. So, he saw it more as a horizontal than a vertical qibla. The basic great circle is based on vertical. That if you if you built the Kaaba up, that it would show up in Canada in northeast. But Awza'i saw it as a horizontal, because we're on the earth and we're facing Kaaba. That you're not facing a celestial phenomenon, you're facing a terrestrial. And so he saw the Kaaba as extending out instead of going up like that for our qibla. Do you understand?
Yeah, but that doesn't make sense because you pray in a circle around the Kaaba.
Only at Kaaba. Because the only time you pray Ayn al-Kaaba is at the Kaaba. Outside of Kaaba, you don't pray in circles. That's why you don't make a qaws. Yeah, you pray in straight lines. So it's the circling of the square, which is a very interesting metaphysical phenomenon. Exactly. That's what religion is. It's the circling of the square. Because it's embracing paradox.
I've also heard that these 6 sides of the Kaaba also, could you bless basically the heart as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of isharat about the Kaaba. I mean, the reason we make tawaf counterclockwise is because the heart's on the left side, so the heart's inclining. The reason you write Arabic is because it's towards the heart, not away from the heart. I mean, those are all isharat. There's nothing, they're nice little things to think about. Anyway, isn't that interesting? I think it is. Huh? Yeah. Because they've turned, now it's all circles. The great circle makes everybody praying in circles around the Kaaba, but that's not the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be circles at the Kaaba and squares around the Kaaba. Yeah, so it's the circling, it's the squaring of the circle. Yeah, but they've circled the square. A sign of the end of time. Engineer, according to Ibn Sirin, in his dream book, if you see an engineer in a dream, he said it means the end of the world. Kharab al-Umran, wa Umran al-Kharab. He said it's the civilization of destruction and the destruction of civilization. Yeah. Handasa was something that was really troubled them. See, that's why I think it's not weapons of mass destruction that's the problem. It's weapons of math instruction. Because all of the madness has come from higher mathematics. No, seriously, the biosphere, I mean, all the stuff that they've enabled to do this is from delving into this stuff till they can split atoms. And if you look, Imam al-Ghazali says, التعمق في الهندسة is muharrama. I mean, he actually says that. To go too deeply into these sciences is prohibited. Yeah. You end up with nuclear bombs. And you don't need it. You don't need it. It's obsessional. They're obsessed about things that they should be obsessed about other things. It's perverted. Muslims always use science to enhance life. So everything they did, it was all about enhancing life and making things more beautiful. They use their science. It's all destructive. 80% of their scientists are working in armaments. 80% of this country's science. John Carroll wrote a book called The House of War. That's what he called America. The House of War. He knows nothing about Islam. The House of War. Translate that into Arabic. Darul Harb. Which is exactly what the Islamic tradition. It is amazing. It is amazing. There's lots of amazing things. And that's one of them. But now don't go out saying I'm against science and I'm anti-math and people do that. No, I'm not. Science is part of Islam, and Muslims had great science, but this is just a weird thing to me. And mashallah, it's, for whatever reasons, it is what it is. And I'm not going to go out on a crusade about this, or a jihad, or whatever. Whoops, I use crusade. I used to use crusade,
There's a problem now, right, with the weird prejudice, because people are so into the sciences, but they ignore the humanities.
Right. No, there's no balance.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like our ulama always learned the humanities before they learned the sciences. And that's the way it should be. Even the really great people of this culture have recognized that.
Okay, that's why they have liberal arts.
Like Lewis, Lives of a Cell, the biologist, his undergraduate was in literature. And he said everybody who does science has to do humanities as a prerequisite. Because he said their science will be inhumane if they don't.
And you also see the love lesson back from white rather than like
Yeah, which is what literature does. It helps you see the grays in life. Yeah, it's a good point. So, conditions of the prayer, facing the Qibla. That's how we got off on that. Facing the Qibla. It should be a lot easier than it is. But, look, don't pray with people. It's permissible to do taqleed of a mihrab if you come into a thing. So just pray with people. Don't I wouldn't. We're in the jihad, inshallah. So that's my position. Anyway, in my house I pray east. That's what I pray in my house. There's even a book about Islam in America called Facing East. They should have changed it and say Facing North. And then everybody would scratch their heads. Isn't Mecca in the East? Well, Great Circle. Oh, what's Great Circle? And then and then being free of khabath. So you have a hadath and khabath. So body, clothing, and place of prayer. So your body has to be free of khabath, unless it's a small, it's dirham al-baghla, like that, about a 50-cent piece of something. If it's going to be difficult to get it off or something like that. And then clothing, place of prayer should be clean. Covering one's nakedness is a condition. And then ritual purity, being in a state of wudu or ghusl from hadath al-akbar. The first three conditions only apply when one remembers them. So facing qibla, free of impurities, and covering one's nakedness. If you forget, like a woman, she might have her hair, if in Maliki, the hair, we're going to get into this on nakedness. It's actually the next one, so I'll wait. So anyway, covering one's nakedness, ritual impurity. First three apply when one remembers them or one has the ability to fulfill them. So if you don't have the ability to fulfill them, it's not an obligation. As for the last condition of ritual purity, without it, prayer is invalid and unlawful. And I would say about nakedness, there is a khilaf about that. If it's awra mughallata, which we're going to go into now. All right? So, it is recommended that one who forgets or is unable to perform these conditions should repeat the prayer in the respective time. So, it's mandub. If a woman, for instance, prays without a headscarf, it's mandub for her to repeat the prayer, but the prayer is valid because the hair is awra mukhaffafa. It's not obscene. It's not obscene nakedness. It's light. If she forgets, she's supposed to cover her head. If she doesn't, it's still valid. Even if she didn't forget, it's still valid. And for free women, for men between the navel and the knee, which means it does not include the navel and it does not include the knee. All right, so the Malikis are a little more lenient on that. So that's why, in Syria when they go swimming, they say, "Ala madhab al-Imam Malik." We're going to go on Imam Malik's madhab because you can wear the shorts. And then there is an opinion that it's actually a so'atan, which is basically what Aboriginal people follow. They're on that opinion. that it's basically just the genitals and the anus that are extreme, obscene nakedness. So in the Maliki, if you pray with this covered, your prayer is valid. All right, for nakedness. But it's mandub, obviously, to cover your. No, it's just above the knee. Yeah. And then for free women, the entire body except the hands up to the wrists. So the hand is not naked. The face, according to Imam Malik, which is the area of wudu that you do wudu in. And then the bottom of the feet. So the top of the feet in Malik's madhab are considered to be awra, unlike Abu Hanifa radiyallahu anhu, that, and I would say it depends on the woman's feet. I mean, they have women that make money off their feet and hands. They put them in the, that have jewelry. Yeah, they have, so people. Some people have really beautiful hands and feet. Other people have really ugly ones. So, but people are attracted to those things. So it's not like a made-up thing. It's a real thing. And in cultures that have a lot of covering, those things become, they become points. Like in Saudi Arabia, an ankle is a serious thing. Like the men take ankles very seriously. I'm not making this up. I mean, this is real. So in our culture here, I mean, somebody pretty much have to go out naked to excite any interest. Do you know?
It's like the Sahabi who was fasting and he saw the anklet glinting in the moonlight.
Yeah, no, exactly. And he made love to her, exactly. And he came to the Prophet and he's like, I lost my fast. And he said, what'd you do? And he told her. He said, I saw her ankle and the Prophet laughed. And then he told him to fast 2 months. He said, Ya Rasul, I couldn't even make it through Ramadan. So he told him to feed the people. And then in the case of the chest or the hair being exposed during an obligatory prayer or one of the limbs, then it is recommended to repeat as long as the time for the prayer is still in, and is permissible to pray if she did not repeat the prayer. So for a woman, the awra mukhaffafa, which is the awra, the nakedness that is light, is everything but the hands, the bottoms of the feet, so she goes into, so she can cover her, my wife usually puts the carpet over her feet, so it just depends on what you do. But the bottom is not nakedness. So if you, and then your face. But the awra mughallada is just below the breasts to the knee, right? So if she exposes any of that, she doesn't have to repeat the prayer. If she repeats it, it's mandub for her to do that. All right? If she doesn't, though, the prayer is valid. And that's why a woman can show the breast to other women if she's, because it's not considered the mughallada for men. The below the knee, yeah. Uh-huh.
Is there an exception if there's any shahwa involved between the two?
What do you mean?
Like it's acceptable that they can show unless, the person seeing it is feeling some type of shahwa. And then it becomes like, why is it trouble?
Well, no, I mean that relates to what they call like a fatina. Some of the ulama say if a woman, her face is so beautiful she has to cover it. Yeah, I mean those are opinions. The applicability of them I find really difficult because women differ and people are attracted to different things. I mean the ulama have these kind of. That's one of the things that I just find really hard to see where it becomes applicable. I once, however, was in an airport and everybody just stopped. And, I was kind of looking like why everybody was stopped. And I didn't know it, but so I heard somebody say it's the Chanel girl. And some girl walked by that was famous thing. But I think it was more celebrity that was stopping them than the beauty. So there's Sayyidina Omar actually exiled a man because he was so beautiful. Because the women were all talking about him all the time, and they were maftunat, by the guy. And first he cut off his hair because he had long hair, and it actually made him more beautiful. And then he just said, "Get him out of here, because I don't want fitna in Medina." So the women, men and women have those funny things.
No, but I mean, just for that, it's an isolated thing. It's not, general. It's just for that person.
Yeah, no, I know. And that is an opinion about covering the face. Yeah. In terms of awrah, like with the mahram, it's encouraged that she cover. But her arms can be exposed to her mahram and her hair. But if she's young, attractive, and he's young, then she should be dressing, even if she's a mahram, she should be dressing in front. Because even though mahramiyya is like brother and sister, there's a different, especially if they didn't grow up together. If they grow up together, it's going to be different. But if they didn't, and they just have, my kids all have wet nurse brothers and sisters, so it just depends on that. And then the conditions of its obligation are being free of menstrual or lochial blood, known by either gypsum-like secretion. So that it's kind of a whitish. Women know that that when the period ends, right? Mm-hmm.
Sorry, going back to is there a part of body then that if it becomes exposed, you do have to repeat prayer?
Only if it's mughallada. If it was the obscene, then it should be repeated. It has to be repeated. If it was mukhaffafa, it doesn't need to be. So if the hair came out, her scarf fell back, something like that, it doesn't have to be. But it's mandub to do it. Mandub means you get a reward for doing it. There's no sin in not doing it. And then dryness. So a woman does not make up the days of missed prayer due to blood. And then the entrance of prayer time. So those are the conditions of its obligation, right? So you have, shurut al-ada, and then shurut al-wujub. So the entrance is shart wujub. Once the prayer time comes in, you're obliged to find. So we're at the stress sunan, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.